Sarah Chen had always wanted to see London. She worked as a nurse in a small town in America. For 5 years, she saved money from each paycheck. Now, at age 32, she was finally in London. The weather was nice, and flowers bloomed in the parks. Her first stop was Buckingham Palace, home of the royal family. Sarah had read about the royal guards. They wore bright red coats and tall black furry hats. They stood very still, no matter what happened around them. They never smiled, talked, or moved while on duty. People often tried to make them laugh or react, but the guards stayed frozen like statues. On her first day, Sarah woke up early. She was too excited to sleep. She ate a quick breakfast at her small hotel and took the subway to the palace. Many tourists were already there, taking pictures of the large golden gates and the grand building behind them. Sarah joined the crowd near the front gate. She watched as the guards marched in perfect steps. Their shoes hit the ground at the same time, making a sharp sound. Their faces showed no feeling. But one guard caught Sarah's eye. He was tall, with strong shoulders. He marched to his spot and stood still, looking straight ahead. Sarah took many pictures. Then she noticed something about this guard. While his body was still, his eyes seemed sad. Most guards looked blank, but this one's eyes held pain. Sarah felt drawn to him, though she didn't know why. Unlike other tourists, Sarah didn't try to make faces at the guard or take silly pictures. She stood back and watched with respect. She had always been good at seeing when people were hurting. It was why she became a nurse. As the day went on, the crowd grew larger. People pushed to get closer to the gates. Children pointed and laughed at the guards. Adults posed for pictures, making funny faces. Sarah stayed for hours, moving around the area but coming back to watch the guard with the sad eyes. The sky began to darken. Rain clouds rolled in. Most tourists left to find shelter. Sarah opened her small travel umbrella but stayed where she was. She noticed the guard had been standing in the same spot for hours. He must be tired, she thought. Soon, rain began to fall. First just a few drops, then heavier. The guard didn't move. Water ran down his face and soaked his red uniform. Still, he stared ahead, not even blinking against the rain. As the crowd thinned even more, Sarah heard two workers walking by. They wore palace uniforms and carried folders. They walked quickly in the rain, talking to each other. "Poor James," one said, standing guard right after hearing about his mother. "The man should be at home." "You know the rules," said the other. "Duty comes first. His replacement won't come until tomorrow." Sarah's heart felt heavy. The guard had a name, James, and he had just lost his mother. Sarah knew that pain well. Her own mother had died 2 years ago from cancer. Sarah had been at her bedside, holding her hand as she took her last breath. Sarah looked at James with new understanding. Now she knew why his eyes seemed so sad. He was keeping his pain locked inside while doing his job. He stood in the rain, not moving, while his heart was breaking. At that moment, Sarah felt a connection to this stranger. Under his uniform and behind his still face was a person who was hurting, just as she had once hurt. The rain fell harder, but Sarah stayed, watching James stand strong even as water dripped from his hat and coat. The rain grew heavier. Most people had left the palace grounds, seeking dry places. Only a few tourists remained, huddled under umbrellas or the nearby trees. Sarah stood alone, her small travel umbrella doing little to keep her dry. Her shoes were soaked, and water dripped down her neck. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had heard. James, the royal guard, had just lost his mother. Yet here he was, standing perfectly still in the pouring rain, doing his duty. Sarah knew the crushing weight of grief. When her mother died, she had taken 3 weeks off work. She couldn't imagine having to work the very next day, especially a job that required such control. Sarah watched as rain streamed down James's face. His red uniform turned dark with water. His tall black hat dripped steadily, yet his expression never changed. His eyes stared straight ahead, though Sarah thought she could see even more sadness in them now. The palace worker's words echoed in her mind. Poor James, standing guard right after hearing about his mother. How hard it must be, she thought, to keep such perfect control when your heart is breaking. Without fully deciding to, Sarah began walking toward him. Her feet moved as if on their own. She knew tourists weren't supposed to bother the guards. Everyone knew the rules. Don't touch them. Don't stand too close. Don't try to make them react. But this wasn't about trying to make him break his stance. This was about one human reaching out to another in pain. Sarah stopped her umbrella and let the rain soak her completely. If he had to stand in the rain, she would too. As she got closer, she noticed details about James. A small scar near his eyebrow. The perfect shine of his buttons, now streaked with rain. The way his jaw clenched slightly, perhaps the only sign of his inner struggle. Sarah stopped directly in front of him, just a few feet away. She knew palace security might stop her, but she had to try. She looked straight into his eyes. "I know you can't speak," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the rain. "And I know you don't know me, but I heard about your mother. I'm so sorry." James stared ahead, looking through her as he was trained to do. But Sarah saw a tiny flicker in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or surprise that a stranger would know his pain. "I lost my mother 2 years ago," Sarah continued. "The pain is, there are no words for it. I know you're doing your job, and I admire your strength. But I want you to know that someone sees you. Not just the uniform. You." Then, breaking every rule about royal guards, Sarah stepped forward. Time seemed to slow down. Rain fell between them. Sarah gently, carefully wrapped her arms around James in a hug. It lasted only seconds, a brief, gentle embrace. Then she stepped back. James remained perfectly still. His face showed nothing. But as Sarah looked at him, she saw a single tear slide down his cheek, mixing with the raindrops. A security officer in a dark coat rushed toward them. "Ma'am, step away from the guard immediately." His voice was sharp with authority. Sarah moved back. "I'm sorry," she said. "I meant no disrespect." "You cannot touch the royal guards," the officer said firmly. "Please leave the area now, or I will have to escort you out." Sarah nodded. She took one last look at James, whose face had returned to its perfect mask. But she knew she had seen that tear. She turned and walked away, her clothes heavy with rain. As she left, she didn't see the palace security officer glance at James with concern. She didn't hear him whisper, "All right there, mate." She didn't see James give the smallest nod, the only movement he had made in hours. Sarah walked back to her hotel in the rain, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Sarah woke early the next morning in her small hotel room. Rain still tapped against the window. She made a cup of tea and sat on the edge of her bed, thinking about yesterday. Had she really hugged a royal guard? It seemed like a dream now. What had she been thinking? She opened her phone and found many messages from friends back home. "Is this you?" they asked. Each message had a link to a news story. Sarah's heart beat faster as she clicked on one. There it was, a photo of her hugging James in the rain. Someone had taken the picture and shared it online. Now it was everywhere. The headlines varied. "Tourist breaks royal protocol to comfort grieving guard." "American woman's hug shocks palace officials." "The embrace that broke all rules." Sarah read the articles with growing worry. Would she be in trouble? Would James lose his job because of her? She scrolled down to read the comments, expecting anger. Instead, she found thousands of supportive messages. This brought tears to my eyes. Pure human kindness. "I lost my father last year and would have given anything for such a gesture." Rules are important, but compassion matters more. The story had hit a nerve with people. In a world full of bad news, this simple act of kindness had touched hearts. Sarah was amazed. She had never meant to become famous. She had only wanted to comfort someone in pain. Sarah's phone rang. It was her best friend, Lisa, calling from Minnesota. "Sarah, you're famous." Lisa's voice was excited. "It's all over the news here. You hugged a royal guard." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Sarah said. "I heard he had just lost his mother." "You're not in trouble. People love what you did. They're calling you the compassion tourist. Even the morning shows are talking about it." Sarah couldn't believe it. She had only followed her heart, doing what felt right in the moment. Now thousands of people were sharing her story. After talking with Lisa, Sarah checked her email. She found messages from news stations asking for interviews. There was even an email from a British morning show asking her to appear. Sarah felt overwhelmed. She was a quiet nurse from a small town. She wasn't used to attention. Sarah decided to continue her London trip as planned. She had saved too long for this vacation to spend it giving interviews. Today she would visit the Tower of London, as she had planned. As she got ready, Sarah wondered about James. Was he okay? Had he gotten in trouble because of her? The articles didn't mention his name, but palace officials surely knew who he was. At the Tower of London, Sarah tried to focus on the history around her. She saw the crown jewels and walked the ancient stone paths, but she kept thinking about James and his grief. She knew how hard those first days after losing a parent could be. The weight of it crushed you, made it hard to breathe. Yet James had stood in the rain, doing his duty. As Sarah waited in line to see the famous ravens, a woman approached her. The woman wore a business suit and had a kind face. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you Sarah Chen, the woman from the palace yesterday?" Sarah nodded, unsure what to expect. "My name is Margaret. I work with Palace Public Relations." The woman handed Sarah a business card. "We'd like to speak with you about what happened. Would you be willing to meet this afternoon?" Sarah's worry returned. Was she in trouble after all? "Am I going to be banned from royal properties?" she asked. Margaret smiled. "Nothing like that. Actually, there are some people who would like to thank you. Can you come to this address at 3 o'clock? She handed Sarah a card with an address. "Thank me." Sarah was confused. "But I broke the rules." "Sometimes rules need bending," Margaret said. 3 o'clock. Sarah nodded. "I'll be there." At precisely 3 o'clock, Sarah stood outside a small, unmarked door on a quiet London street. The address Margaret had given her was not what Sarah expected. It wasn't a grand palace building, but a simple brick townhouse with dark green shutters. Sarah knocked. The door opened to reveal Margaret in her neat business suit. "Thank you for coming, Miss Chen," she said, gesturing for Sarah to enter. "Please, this way." Sarah stepped into a warm sitting room with comfortable chairs and a fireplace. Tea and small cakes waited on a table, but what caught Sarah's eye was the tall man standing by the window. He wore a simple dark suit, not a royal uniform. When he turned, Sarah recognized him immediately. James, the guard she had hugged. "Hello, Miss Chen," he said in a deep voice with a slight accent from northern England. "I'm James Harrington." Sarah felt her face grow warm. "I'm so sorry if I got you in trouble," she said quickly. James shook his head. "You didn't." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down. I wanted to thank you properly." As Sarah sat, Margaret poured tea for them and then discreetly left the room. Sarah found herself alone with the royal guard who had stood so still in the rain. James sat across from her. Up close, without his tall hat, he looked younger than she had thought, perhaps mid-30s. His eyes were the same ones that had caught her attention, serious with hidden depth. "My mother died 3 days ago," James said simply. "Cancer. It was quick at the end. I got the call just before my shift." "I'm so sorry," Sarah said. "I lost my mother to cancer too." James nodded. "The rules say we must complete our duties unless physically unable. I could stand, so I stood. In a way, it helped, having something to focus on besides grief." "I understand," Sarah said. "After my mom died, I went back to work too soon. The routine helped, But some days I'd have to hide in the supply closet to cry. A small smile touched James's lips. No supply closets on the palace grounds, unfortunately. I'm sorry I broke the rules, Sarah said. I heard those palace workers talking about you. And I know how it feels. That first raw grief. I couldn't walk past without saying something. Your hug was the first real kindness I'd felt since getting the news, James said. My father died years ago. Mom was my only close family. I've been alone in handling everything. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. That's how it was for me too. Dad left when I was little. It was just Mom and me. They talked for over an hour, sharing stories of their mothers. James showed Sarah a photo of his mother, a smiling woman with his same serious eyes, standing in a garden full of roses. She loved her roses, James said, would spend hours tending them. My mom loved cooking, Sarah said. Every Sunday, she'd make a big meal, even when it was just us two. As they talked, the strangeness of their meeting faded. They were just two people sharing their grief, finding comfort in understanding. Finally, James set down his teacup. Miss Chen. Sarah, please. Sarah, what you did was technically against palace rules, but it meant everything to me. I've been a guard for 12 years, and no one has ever seen me as a person, not really. They see the uniform, the hat, the stance. You saw me. From his pocket, James took a small pin, a silver emblem of his guard regiment. This is given to those who have served honorably, he said, holding it out to her. I'd like you to have it. Sarah shook her head. I couldn't take that. You earned it. Please, James said, as a thank you, for reminding me that behind every duty is a human heart. Sarah carefully took the pin. Thank you. I'll treasure it. As Sarah prepared to leave, James walked her to the door. The palace wants to invite you to a private tour tomorrow, if you're interested. Areas most tourists don't see. I'd like that, Sarah said. At the doorway, they paused. This time, it was James who stepped forward and gave Sarah a quick, proper hug. Thank you, he said simply, for breaking the rules when it mattered most. The next morning, a black car with tinted windows arrived at Sarah's hotel. The driver, dressed in a neat uniform, opened the door for her. Good morning, Miss Chen. I'm Robert. I'll be taking you to the palace for your special tour. Sarah climbed in, feeling both excited and nervous. She wore her best outfit, a simple blue dress and comfortable shoes. Pinned to her collar was James's silver regiment pin. She touched it for luck as the car drove through London's busy streets. At the palace, they didn't go to the main tourist entrance. Instead, the car turned down a small side road and stopped at a plain door. An older man in a dark suit waited there. Welcome, Miss Chen. I'm Walter Kingston, head of palace tours. He had white hair and kind eyes behind glasses. We have a special day planned for you. Sarah followed Walter through corridors most visitors never saw. He showed her rooms where royal staff worked, the kitchens where state dinner food was prepared, and a small museum of palace history not open to the public. This is amazing, Sarah said as they walked. But I still don't understand. Why are you doing this for me? Walter smiled. What you did has touched many people, Miss Chen. Not just James, but others who work here. The palace can be formal. Rules and traditions are important, yes, but sometimes we forget the human element. As they turned a corner, Sarah was surprised to see a woman in an elegant blue suit waiting for them. She looked familiar. Miss Chen, Walter said, his voice suddenly more formal. May I present Lady Amelia Barrington, Lady-in-Waiting to the Queen. Sarah's eyes widened. Lady Amelia was often seen in photos with the royal family. She was known for her charity work with grief support groups. Miss Chen, Lady Amelia said, stepping forward to shake Sarah's hand. I wanted to meet you personally. Your act of kindness has been discussed at the highest levels. I never meant to cause a stir, Sarah said. But you did, and in the best possible way, Lady Amelia replied. You see, I lost my husband 3 years ago. The support I received helped me through the darkest days. But many, like James, suffer alone. Lady Amelia guided Sarah to a small sitting room where tea was served. As they talked, Sarah learned that Lady Amelia had started a program for palace staff dealing with grief and stress. James had joined the group after his mother's death. Your hug reminded us all that compassion should never be bound by protocol, Lady Amelia said. I'd like to invite you to our next support meeting. Your perspective as a nurse who works with grieving families would be valuable. I'd be honored, Sarah said, but I leave London in 3 days. Then we shall arrange it for tomorrow evening, Lady Amelia said decisively. Now, let's continue your tour. They walked through gardens not open to the public. Sarah watched guards changing shifts, now seeing them differently. Behind each straight face and perfect stance was a person with joys and sorrows. As they passed through a corridor, Sarah glimpsed James. He wore an indoor uniform now, still formal, but not the tall hat and red coat. He gave her a small nod and smile as she passed. Later, as the tour ended, Walter handed Sarah an envelope. From James, he said. He asked me to give this to you. Alone in the car heading back to her hotel, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Sarah, thank you again for your kindness. My mother's funeral is tomorrow at 2 p.m. at St. Martin's Church in Kensington. If you would like to attend, you would be welcome. No pressure, of course. James. Sarah felt honored by the invitation. She had never expected to attend a funeral during her London vacation, but she knew she would go. She understood the comfort of having someone there who truly understood your loss. That evening, Sarah bought flowers, not grand funeral arrangements but simple daisies, bright and cheerful. The kind of flowers that make you smile even on sad days. She wrote a small card, to honor a mother who raised a son with such dedication and strength. Sarah Chen. As Sarah prepared for bed that night, she marveled at how different her London trip had become from what she had planned. Instead of just seeing famous buildings and taking tourist photos, she had made a real connection. She had seen behind the formal face of London to the human hearts within. The small stone church was filled with people when Sarah arrived for the funeral. She slipped into a back pew, feeling like an outsider. She wore a simple black dress she had bought that morning, her nurse's budget stretched thin by the unexpected purchase. James stood at the front by the casket, greeting people. He wore his military dress uniform with medals on his chest. His face had the same control she had seen when he stood guard, but his eyes showed his pain. The church filled with people of all types, some in uniforms like James, others in regular clothes. Sarah was surprised by how many had come to honor Mrs. Harrington. She had expected a small service. The minister spoke about Eleanor Harrington, a gardener, a teacher, a friend to many. Sarah learned that she had taught primary school for 40 years. Former students, now adults, filled many seats. When James stood to speak, Sarah held her breath. His voice was steady, but emotion ran beneath his words. My mother taught me 3 things, he said. Duty, kindness, and strength. She showed me that true strength isn't about never breaking. It's about how you put yourself back together. Sarah thought about her own mother and wiped away tears. Around her, others did the same. After the service, people gathered in the church garden for tea. Sarah stood apart, unsure if she should leave. Then James appeared beside her. You came, he said simply. Of course, Sarah replied. She sounds like she was a wonderful person. She would have liked you, James said. She always said I was too serious. Needed more people in my life who followed their heart. An older woman approached them. James, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? Aunt Helen, this is Sarah Chen. She's the American nurse I told you about. The woman's eyes lit up. The hugger. Oh, my dear, what a wonderful thing you did. Our James has always been so proper. Needed someone to crack that shell. Sarah smiled. I just did what felt right. That's what Eleanor always said too. Follow your heart, even when rules say otherwise. Aunt Helen patted Sarah's hand. You must come to the house. Everyone is gathering there. Sarah hesitated. I don't want to intrude on family time. Nonsense, Aunt Helen declared. You're coming. James, make sure she gets there. After Aunt Helen walked away, James looked embarrassed. You don't have to come if you don't want to. I'd like to, Sarah said, if you're sure it's okay. James's family home was a modest brick house with the rose garden his mother had loved. Inside, people shared stories about Eleanor over food and drinks. Sarah listened, learning more about the woman who had raised James to be so dutiful yet kind. In the kitchen, Sarah helped Aunt Helen prepare more tea. James tells me you lost your mother too, the older woman said. Sarah nodded. 2 years ago. It gets easier, but there are still days. When the grief hits you like a wave, Aunt Helen finished. I know. Eleanor was my sister, my only sister. She wiped tears with her apron. James has been so strong, handling everything. But he needs people, real connections, not just duty and service. Later, in the garden, James showed Sarah his mother's prize roses. She could make anything grow, he said. These will bloom again next spring, even though she's gone. That's how it is with mothers, Sarah said. What they plant in us keeps growing after they're gone. As evening fell, Sarah said she should return to her hotel. James walked her to the taxi. Thank you for coming, he said. It meant a lot. I'm glad I could be here, Sarah replied. Your mother created a beautiful life. I have duty at the palace tomorrow, James said. But perhaps we could meet for coffee the next day, before you leave London. Sarah smiled. I'd like that. As the taxi drove away, Sarah thought about how strangers could become important so quickly. She had come to London seeking famous sights, but had found something more meaningful, a human connection that crossed boundaries of country and custom. Back at her hotel, Sarah found another message on her phone. A London news channel wanted to interview her about the hug that went viral. Sarah decided she would decline. What had happened between her and James wasn't about fame or attention. It was about one human recognizing another's pain. That was private, special, not for television. Instead, Sarah wrote in her travel journal about the funeral, about Eleanor's roses, about the way grief could connect people across oceans and cultures. Some experiences weren't meant to be shared with the world, just treasured in the heart. On Sarah's last full day in London, she met James at a small cafe near St. James Park. Away from the palace and funeral, in regular clothes, he looked different, more relaxed, though still with perfect posture. How are you doing? Sarah asked as they sat with coffee. Better, James said. Busy with arrangements, but better. How has the rest of your London visit been? Sarah told him about the places she'd seen. The Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, the British Museum. But she admitted she hadn't done as much sightseeing as planned. Your hug has made you quite famous, James said with a small smile. Have reporters been bothering you? I've turned down all interviews, Sarah said. It wasn't about getting attention. I appreciate that, James said. Some of the other guards have been teasing me. They call me Hugs Harrington now. Sarah laughed. I'm sorry about that. Don't be. It's the first time in 12 years they've seen me as more than just another uniform. James stirred his coffee. The funny thing is, my mother would have loved this story. She always said I was too stiff, too bound by rules. Was she right? Sarah asked. James thought for a moment. Probably. The military was good for me, gave me structure after my father died. But perhaps I took the discipline too much to heart. They talked for hours, moving from subject to subject. Sarah told James about her work as a nurse in Minnesota, about the small town where snow covered everything for months each winter. James shared stories of his years as a guard. The strange things tourists did, the important people he'd seen. Will you stay in the Guards? Sarah asked. Yes, James said. I believe in what we do. Tradition matters. Structure matters. But perhaps with a bit more humanity mixed in. As they walked through the park after coffee, James asked about Sarah's plans. "My flight is tomorrow afternoon," she said. "Back to real life. Back to work on Monday. Will you tell people about hugging a royal guard? Maybe a few close friends. The rest would never believe me anyway." They stopped by the water, watching ducks swim past. The sun broke through clouds, warming the day. "Sarah," James said, his voice serious, "I want to thank you again. Not just for the hug, but for seeing me. Really seeing me. Most people look at the uniform, the hat, the stance. You looked deeper. It's part of being a nurse," Sarah said. "You learn to see past the surface." "Well, it changed something for me," James admitted. "Made me realize I've been hiding behind duty for too long. Using it as a shield against real connections." From his pocket, James took a small envelope. "I know we've only known each other a few days, but I'd like to stay in touch, if you want to, of course." Inside the envelope was a card with his email and phone number. "I'm not on social media," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Another way I've kept the world at a distance, I suppose." Sarah took out her phone. "Let's take a picture," she said. "A proper one. Not of me hugging you in the rain." They stood together by the water, smiling as Sarah held up her phone. In the photo, they looked like any two friends enjoying a London park, no hint of the unusual way they had met. As evening approached, they walked toward the subway station. "What will you do when you get home?" James asked. Sarah thought for a moment. "I've been thinking about starting a support group at my hospital. For families who've lost someone. There's nothing like that in our small town." "That sounds wonderful," James said. "You'd be good at it." At the station entrance, they stopped. This goodbye felt significant, though they had only known each other for a few days. "If you ever visit Minnesota," Sarah began. "I'll look you up," James promised. "And if you return to London, I'll come see you at the palace," Sarah said with a smile. "But I won't hug you while you're on duty again." "Perhaps after my shift ends," James suggested, his eyes warm. They hugged goodbye, a proper hug between friends, not a forbidden one between tourist and guard. As Sarah headed down the stairs to the subway, she turned back to wave. James stood tall as always, but now with a genuine smile on his face. Back at her hotel, Sarah packed her suitcase for tomorrow's flight. She carefully wrapped James's regiment pin in tissue paper and placed it in her jewelry case. It would always remind her of this unexpected London connection. In her travel journal, Sarah wrote, "Sometimes the most meaningful parts of a journey aren't the famous places you see, but the unexpected moments of human connection. A gesture as simple as a hug can break through barriers we didn't even know existed." 3 months later, back in Minnesota, Sarah's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from James. They had been writing to each other regularly since she left London. His messages were always proper and a bit formal, but warm. This email was different. "I've put in for leave time," he wrote. "I'll be visiting the States next month. Minneapolis is on my itinerary. Would it be possible to see you?" Sarah smiled as she typed her reply. "Absolutely. You can stay in our guest room if you'd like. My small town is just an hour from Minneapolis." In the months since London, Sarah had started her support group at the hospital. She called it Hearts Together and held meetings twice a month for people who had lost loved ones. She often wore James's regiment pin on her nursing uniform. When patients asked about it, she told them the story of the Royal Guard with the sad eyes. Sarah's story had not faded from public memory. A British documentary maker had created a short film called The Human Touch about moments when protocol gave way to compassion. Sarah's hug was featured, though she had declined to be interviewed. Instead, they used the viral photo and quotes from people who had been touched by the story. The documentary won a small award and was shown in schools across Britain. James told Sarah in his emails that the palace had used it in training for new guards and staff. teaching them that while protocol mattered, compassion mattered more. On a sunny autumn day, Sarah waited at the Minneapolis airport. When James walked through the arrival gate, she almost didn't recognize him. In jeans and a simple sweater, without his tall guard's hat and red coat, he looked like any other traveler. But he still had perfect posture and those same thoughtful eyes. "Welcome to Minnesota," Sarah said, giving him a hug. "Thank you for having me," James replied, his British accent drawing glances from nearby travelers. On the drive to her town, Sarah pointed out lakes and farmland. "Not as grand as London," she said, "but it's home." "It's beautiful," James said. "Open, peaceful." Sarah had taken 2 weeks off work to show James her part of America. They visited the Mississippi headwaters, vast cornfields, and small-town festivals. James charmed Sarah's friends with his accent and stories of palace life. At the hospital, Sarah gave James a tour. Her coworkers had heard the story of the royal guard and treated him like a celebrity. James blushed at the attention, but answered their questions about palace life with good humor. "This is where I hold my support group," Sarah said, showing him a small conference room. On the wall hung photos of group members' lost loved ones. "We call it our memory wall." "May I?" James asked, holding up a small photo of his mother. "Of course," Sarah said, handing him a pin. James carefully added his mother's picture to the wall. That evening, Sarah took James to her favorite spot, a small lake near her house. They sat on the dock as the sun set, turning the water gold and red. "I never thank you properly," James said quietly. "For what?" "The hug. You've thanked me many times." "Not for the hug itself, for what came after." James looked out across the water. "That moment changed me, made me look at my life differently." "How so?" Sarah asked. "I realized I'd been hiding behind duty, using it as a reason to avoid real connections, real feelings." James turned to her. "After my father died, I shut down. The military gave me structure, rules to follow. I became the perfect guard because it meant I didn't have to be myself." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now I'm sitting on a dock in Minnesota with a woman I met because she broke all the rules." James smiled. "I've applied for a teaching position with the Royal Military Academy, training new guards, but with a focus on the human element alongside tradition. They've accepted me." "James, that's wonderful," Sarah exclaimed. "Your support group inspired me," he said, "using your own experience to help others. I want to do the same." As stars appeared above them, James took Sarah's hand. "I know we live in different countries, different worlds really, but these past months of letters and calls, getting to know you, I feel it too," Sarah said simply. "I don't know what happens next," James admitted. "London to Minnesota is a long way." "We'll figure it out," Sarah said, "one step at a time." In the quiet Minnesota evening, so different from the rainy London day when they first met, Sarah realized how a single moment of compassion had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A tourist and a royal guard, connected by shared grief, now building something new together. "My mother used to say that life surprises you when you least expect it," Sarah said. "Mine too," James replied. "She also said to grab hold of good things when they come along." Under the wide Minnesota sky, they sat together, no longer guard and tourist, no longer bound by protocol or separated by an ocean. Just two people finding their way forward, one step at a time. 1 year after their first meeting, Sarah stood outside Buckingham Palace again. This time, she wasn't a tourist. She had a special pass hanging around her neck. The palace looked the same, grand and imposing, but Sarah saw it differently now. She knew the people behind the walls, the human stories inside. Today was special. James was receiving an award for his new training program for Royal Guards. The program, called Dignity and Duty, taught guards to maintain tradition while remembering their humanity. It had changed how palace staff thought about their roles. Sarah checked her watch. She had time before the ceremony. She walked to the spot where she had first seen James standing in the rain. Tourists crowded around, taking pictures of the current guards. Sarah smiled, remembering how nervous she had been that day. So much had changed in a year. After James's visit to Minnesota, they had talked every day, despite the time difference. 3 months ago, Sarah had taken a leap of faith. She applied for a nursing position at a London hospital that specialized in grief counseling. With her experience and growing reputation from her support group work, she was accepted. Moving to London had been scary, leaving her small town, her friends, her familiar hospital, but also exciting. A new chapter. James had helped her find a small flat not far from his. They were taking things slowly, building a relationship based on more than one emotional moment in the rain. Miss Chen, a palace staff member, approached. "They're ready for you." Sarah followed her through a side entrance and down corridors, now familiar from her special tour a year ago. In a grand room with paintings of kings and queens on the walls, chairs were arranged for the ceremony. Sarah was shown to a seat in the front row. Lady Amelia nodded to her from across the room. They had become friends over the past year. Sarah's work with grief support had impressed her, and she had helped Sarah bring her Hearts Together program to London hospitals. The ceremony began. Men and women in formal uniforms stood at attention as awards were presented. When James's name was called, Sarah felt pride swell in her chest. He walked forward in his full guard uniform, back straight, head high. But now she could see the warmth in his eyes, the small smile he allowed himself.